How's everyone
Let's get
feeling?
ourselves set up.
Yeah. Come on, we need some excitement in the room, guys. Go on. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Zoe from Treasury Wine Estates, and I'm joined here by David from Bulletproof. And we are really, really excited to talk to you today about a little project that we've been working on that uses a lot of data, a bit of daring creativity, and an amazing, amazing partnership, essentially to disrupt the UK wine market. So a really good place to start when talking about this project is to talk about the challenge that we were trying to overcome. To put it pretty simply and briefly, younger consumers are far less engaged with the wine category versus any other age demographic. So how do we put wine on the lips of a generation that just doesn't drink wine? And how do we really encourage them to interact more with this category? Gen Z and young millennials together make around 26% of the UK wine drinking population. So only 5% of them are Gen Z, and only 21% of those are millennials. It's really, really important to us that we're recruiting these consumers in as early as we can to drive that long-term loyalty. But we knew that there was a significant opportunity to unlock with these consumers. There was one really small, slight barrier to that. They're actually 3 times more likely to choose spirits, RTDs, and other cocktails over wine. So we knew that we really needed to create something that was very compelling, and we knew that we needed to create something that was going to push wine front of mind for these consumers. So let's delve a little bit deeper into what that consumer opportunity really was. It's not necessarily that this generation are losing interest in wine. It's more that they're just more focused on the social and cultural connections. So these consumers are actively seeking brands that they can interact with that are going to provide this for them. And it really forced us to rethink our positioning on this. And actually, we need to look at it as wine becoming a vessel for facilitating those unique cultural experiences. So who is our consumer target for this project? It's what we call the experience maximizers. And they're low involved in the category, which means they're not super confident in the wine knowledge that they have, but they're also younger, so they're around age 18 to 29. But we very much describe them as young progressives on a journey of discovery, and they like to experiment with lots of different types of alcohol, including wine. At the very early stages of this project, we did some focus groups with our experience maximizers. And it revealed a key insight that I think historically we may have overlooked, and I think we probably overcomplicated it. But they really crave adventure within the familiar. So they want something that's really new and exciting, but not at the cost of comfort. What does familiar look like from a wine-based cocktail perspective? None other than sangria. It's really the only well-known wine-based cocktail within the UK, but also globally.
Who wants a sangria? Bash!
But we knew we had a pretty big job to do in changing perceptions of sangria. It's pretty traditional, it's quite old, it's a little bit dusty, but what we did know was that it was ripe for reinvention.
Right. Now we're going to move into the creative part. There's some amazing data, amazing insight that really fueled the start point of this creative journey. So what we're going to talk to you about today is very quickly how we built the brand, what the insight drove, and how looking at history really inspired the kind of roots of sangria in this new product. So this is going to be the creative leap. This is where we're looking at infusing creativity with soul. So there's a really beautiful backstory with sangria. Its origins are Spanish, and it really is the kind of lifeblood of the Spanish people. It's something that's really intrinsic to their culture. But why sangria? I think it's so important in going back creatively to look at the product itself, looking at what that means to the Spanish culture, and also then the rich symbolism that was an amazing start point to build a creative platform and a brand from. When you think about sangria, it's a really rich product. It's rooted in red wine, but it's the spices, the herbs, the fruit that really kind of invigorate that base flavor. The origination of sangria comes from the monks and the nuns that actually tended to the vineyards in the 18th century in Spain. So There's a lovely kind of pseudo-religious story that we're trying to lean into here. And you might all be thinking, how do we connect religion to something alcoholic? But we were trying to do this in a very subtle way. And the rich symbolism as well was a really beautiful kind of start point to build out this story. But of course, when you think about those start points, you have to be a little bit careful. So this wasn't about telling a religious story where we start talking about nuns on the run and Whoopi Goldberg. And it's certainly not going into Monty Python territories. I think this is much more about delivering something that felt like a secret society, a bit of a club, something you could belong to. And when you think about Gen Z, they're a really interesting audience. It's almost overused as a term, I think, at the moment. But they're very discerning as an audience, and they approach religion and their beliefs in a similar way to the way they do brands, nights out, the way they connect with food, connect with people. So there's a really interesting link between, say, religion and brands and the way that Gen Z operates. And I think sometimes the best nights out, I'm not that generation, so I can't comment. But the best nights out are a bit like a cult. They're a bit like a following. It's something that you discover. It's something that you find. It's something where you capture that communal spirit. And we wanted to really bring that through in the branding and the naming. We took a bit of a left-of-center approach to naming. You can imagine in the world that we're in, it's really tough to find a unique name for a brand. Every URL is owned by somebody. So rather than go down the very obvious cliches of trying to find a name that describes the flavor of the product, we wanted to create something that was a bit like a cult band. So, and these aren't on my Spotify playlist, but it's great inspiration when you look at things like Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden. A new one for me was Lamb of God. Who are they? I've never heard of them. But the way they name their albums is really interesting in terms of building communities, these cult followings. So that was a really interesting insight and creative direction for us to lean into. And that led us to something that felt quite mysterious, quite evocative. So there are roots in the name that go back to what I was mentioning earlier around the nuns tendering to the vineyards. Vine obviously is in the name. So Daughters of the Vine feels like a really interesting name that really disrupts the category. And building on the name, we wanted to build a world around that that leans into those kind of 18th century codes, but through the lens of something that feels really modern. So we kind of took those kind of marble sculptural forms that you might find in the monasteries, and we kind of build this. It's almost like an album cover, something that's evocative of who are these Daughters of the Vine, who is this collective of people. And then building that brand out is really about delivering social content, connecting with that consumer in the right way, with the right channels. Something that feels intriguing, exclusive, it's an invitation, you kind of want to find more. The social content's really driven by these snippets that are a bit of a tease into the brand. So rather than being too explicit, it's something you want to discover and find out more about. We then translated all of that thinking into the packaging. Now, the packaging evokes a sense of this story behind the daughters, but the color and the feeling of the packs really evokes the product as well, the liquid. I'm right in saying there are 3 flavors in this RTD range at the moment. So here we've got sangria with blood orange and ginger, so you can see the kind of color brings through the flavor cues. And as you move into kind of content for social, it's building that narrative. So a really central part of this brand was a tone of voice, that nod to that kind of religious insight that we had, but building a narrative, building a story, teasing the kind of consumers into the brand. And again, we wanted the brand over time to start feeling like it's really powered by the consumer, so content feels like it's their experience of their night out with this brand, something that feels really authentic rather than a brand pushing content out. And again, you can see how the tone of voice really kind of draws in that consumer to this slightly pseudo-cult following that you might be part of. And the use of kind of lo-fi media, so you think about the best way that a band might promote themselves, it would be fly posters. So this isn't about big above-the-line campaigns. It's about tapping into ways to connect with that audience to feel much more lo-fi, something you can discover, and something that really builds the brand over time. And I think just to conclude, I think this was a really bold way to start to describe sangria. It was really driven by insight, driven by data, but the backstory to sangria really fueled something that feels fresh, innovative, and differentiating. I think importantly, I've tried the product. I'm not a big sangria fan, but it's amazing. It's really good. I'm not trying to sell it here, but that's...
I paid him to say that.
And as I say, it's a bit of an invitation for you all to try this brand as well. Final chapter, there are some really great learnings from our partnership on this journey. We don't want this to sound like any kind of cliche where client and agency come together and kind of try and promote how we work, but genuinely to get to a piece of work like this took a lot of trust and a lot of collaboration. So we've got a few points we're going to leave you with.
Yeah, so as David said, it was all about partnership. From the get-go, both the Treasury team but also the Bulletproof team fully worked on this collaboratively as one. We were really trusting of each other from the beginning, but we also weren't afraid to challenge each other throughout the process as well.
And then there's creative confidence. I think an agency is only as good as its clients, so you've got to have confidence and trust in each other. And you've got to have that courage collectively to try and disrupt something that might feel a bit uncomfortable. So a lot of what we did at times felt a bit risky. The things that we were leaning into, the naming, the kind of backstory with religion, it's stuff that you maybe don't want to associate with alcohol, but I think it's given us a really unique brand.
And obviously data and instinct. We were very much led by the insight, but we also just really trusted our gut. We had a bit of a hunch and we just took the punt, but I think the magic really came from balancing both of those things together. Just before you all head off to your next inspiring talk of the day, for those of you who don't know, Treasury Wines is the wine sponsor for MadFest this year, so we want to give you all a chance to win a year's supply worth of wine. So in order to be in the running, all you need to do is head across all of the bars across MadFest and scan the QR codes. Since you've joined the talk today, you get 30 points already. So you can claim those by going into the app, going onto the More tab. You'll find the Treasury Wine Hunt and you'll see Game Centre. If you click into that and scan this QR code, you can then be in the running. But thank you so much for your time today, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.